You like
How's it
it?
going?
I like it.
Sandwich artist, right?
Yes.
That's
I'm ready to still conquer that.
Was it hard? Because I mean, like, people, I had a friend who worked at Starbucks and stuff, it's like, that's a lot to learn. Subway, there's a lot of, combinations and stuff.
It's simple though. It's like
I guess the Subway, you got people telling you what to
And
do,
you got like
right?
little charts in front of you.
Right,
'Cause
and
she's
then
my
learning
coach.
the
She works there
bread
with
and all.
me. Candy
Oh,
works with
really?
me there.
I didn't realize that.
Oh, and Amazon?
No, I quit. I quit my job because of my son.
All right. Well, let's start with a word of prayer, and actually, let's start with the introductions. So my name is Drew. I'm the pastor of the Church of Severn Run, and am delighted to be here with you guys. We're talking about communication, and we're going over all kinds of different communication, and later for you, Kiara and Victoria, kind of go over some of the foundations in the front, and some of the scriptures are really, really key to kind of building on what we're talking about. And so, can you guys tell us a little bit about yourself? Where were you born? And are you from here or
I'm not. I'm from Philadelphia.
Philadelphia? Okay. How long have you been in the Baltimore area?
I lived here for a year, like 3 years ago, and then I moved back in like March.
Okay. All right. Victoria, how about you?
I've been back and forth between here and Liberty.
Okay. All right. And I'm assuming you guys all know each other, everybody?
Mhm.
All right. All right. Well, let's start with a word of prayer, and we will jump in. Father, I thank you that you love us and that you've invited us to walk with you through life. We don't have to do it on our own, and we don't have to follow other people who lead us to dark places. Father, every day your love rises like the sun, and every day the Scripture says your mercies are new. And every day, Father, you invite us to take your hand and walk with you through the day. That's why the most important words are just follow me. So Jesus, help us to follow you and to listen for your voice. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
Hi.
Hello, hello.
Late person.
That's important right here. Pages 4 and 5 to add to.
Thank you.
There's your paper from last week, Lisa.
Yep.
Yeah, well, I'm like, what do you-
Okay, so we're gonna finish up the page C, and then we're gonna jump into some really kind of deep stuff as we have time in terms of self-talk. And we're gonna make a distinction today about the voices in your head and the voice that we should be listening to. But so we kind of were finishing up last week about listening, and remember that communication doesn't happen until you've understood somebody else. It's not just about you. It's not just about you saying what you want to say. It's about you stopping and actually listening, not only to what somebody's saying, but to what somebody else is feeling. And we're going to talk about that again a lot later, but you're really not communicating in interpersonal communication, like between friends or where there's emotion. You're not communicating until you know what somebody is feeling. Now, in a business type of environment, it's a little different. But let's talk about types of communication, formal and informal. So, when you guys started at Subway a couple months ago, both?
No, I just started.
Just started.
Last week or so.
Okay. So we have a way of talking to our friends. Hello, Rakonda. We have a way of talking to our friends, and we have a way of talking to our family, right? How's that different than how you speak on a job interview?
Well, I guess the job interview, you really have to watch what you say. Even with the family, you start to watch what you say, but during the job interview, you have to be very respectful. You have to be looking straight at the person, and you have to answer the questions, and it's also your body language, your movements and all that when you're going out on a job interview or something, compared to being with the family or something like that, you can just kick back and say whatever, you know, if it hurts their feelings, and say, oh, well, you know, deal with it. Some families, you know what I'm saying? But, yeah.
Well, good answer, good answer.
Casual, and when you're in an interview, it's more professional, you have to talk professional, and with family, you can talk casual.
So what is professional? Let's talk about professional. What is professional talking and communication? What's it look like?
Like, saying good morning, ma'am, and
Mhm.
using all the proper etiquette and talking and stuff like that, no slang,
Now, see,
slowing, no.
yeah, no slang, but see, like, for me, like, with the Subway thing, I had just got hired with Amazon, and I went up there for lunch, and they were busy, and I asked him, the guy that owned the Subway was there, and I was like, are you hiring? He was like, no. He goes, but we're always accepting application, go on subway.com. And I was like, oh. I was like, yeah, I used to work for a Subway. I was like, yeah, and I loved it. And he looked at me, and he goes, you used to work for Subway? Oh, yeah, I loved it. He goes, you really did? I was like, yeah, man. I was like, man, I make awesome sandwiches, and da-da-da. And he's like, well, and then I explained to him that I was at the well, and da-da-da-da-da. And then he says, well, put your application in. I'm like, all right. And I never did. Just because I was just like, well, I'm gonna go to work at Amazon, and then he ended up calling me without me putting my application in the next day.
Wow.
And he was like, you really like working at Subway? I'm like, yeah, I like working at Subway. I mean, I enjoyed it. And he was like, you can work nights and weekends? Yeah. And he hired me.
Wow. Wow, that's great.
Mentioned you, I was so excited to talk to
That
you.
was just like that was just like on a humble thing, though.
That's a God thing, right?
Then you're the words to say, when to say it.
So in professional communication, what about somebody who says, well, I don't want to be fake, I just got to be me?
Well,
What would you say to him?
that means just be
You don't have a
polite.
job.
Yeah,
And
hopefully
you're a
you're
polite
self-employed.
person and kind person then, because some people can be just you can be professional and informal at the same time, just be yourself,
Mm-hmm.
depending on the person, personality.
You have to kind of read people, see where they're at. I mean, if they're, you know, but sometimes people, depending on where you work, sometimes people will act all casual and laid back just to see how you respond to it. To see if you're still gonna be professional.
Like in job interview and things like that? Yeah.
Absolutely, just see how you handle it and how you respond to it.
You
You
know,
just have to, you have to be true to yourself and, you know,
yeah,
know that God's listening, how would you want him to feel?
I had offered my neighbor, I had went on that work van,
Mm-hmm.
and one of my neighbors, he was saying he was looking for a job, so they were hiring for security. And he smokes his weed, okay? And we were just talking, and I was just telling him, I was like, hey, you know, I got this number, blah, blah, blah. He was like, okay, I'm gonna give him a call. I says, but they do drug tests. And he was like, well, you know what? I'm gonna call, and he called the man, but thank God the man didn't answer. And he called him like a couple times, the man still didn't answer. So he was like, yeah, well, I'm just gonna be me. I'm just gonna tell him the truth. Like, hey, I'm gonna let him up front know, like, hey, I smoke weed. I'm like,
That might not work.
I was like, yeah. He was like, well, I'm not gonna lie to him. I'm gonna say, look, man, look, I smoke weed. You know, I'm not gonna waste your time on my time. I'm like, okay, just don't tell him that I.
So
Don't
that's
use
a,
my name.
yeah. So it might be okay to say I smoked weed, you know, if you want to change, right?
Smoked.
Yeah, right. If you want to change, and nobody's talking about lying.
Right.
But the point is it's really about maturity. You know, a kid talks like a kid and you expect him to, right? A 4-year-old's gonna talk like a 4-year-old. You don't expect a 20-year-old to talk like a 4-year-old
Right.
because they're more mature.
Right.
So don't buy into the lie that being me is being, you know, immature, because it's not. Being professional means that you don't throw all your stuff out on the table, all right? And we're going to talk about this in a little while, but there's concentric levels, concentric circles, and we will use this for a lot of different things. And you have different levels of relationship with people at each of these levels. Out here, you could have 1,000 people that you bump into, and you know Here, you know, you might have 100 people whose names you kind of remember, and then it gets to the people who are really close to you, and then when it gets to this circle of like really best friends and people who really know you, you really can't have more than 2 or 3 people in the innermost circle in your life because there's just not time or room. And so the circles exist at all different levels, and put another way, just even forgetting about the numbers, you don't talk to these people like you talk to these people. You don't share some of the things that you share, you know, with these people, with these people. Some people don't have a filter, right? Any of y'all ever heard the term overshare? What's that about?
I've done that. I remember my first interview at the Coast Guard. I was workforce development through high school, and we went and we were talking, and the lady was asking me questions, and she asked me how I like all the rest of the people. And I'm like, oh man, I really like, you know, Shannon and I are like best friends. And I said, you know, I said it's a shame, you know, what happened to her. And she's like, what happened to her? And I'm like, was her quitting high school. And she was just like, oh, and she kind of blew it off and like kept talking, but then come to find out Shannon was like on the brink. She wasn't, because she got pregnant. And so it was like me saying that prompted, I mean, she was going to do what she was going to do anyway, but it was just like, I remember my teacher reamed me out. I mean, but I learned a lesson, you know what I mean? And it's
What
just like,
was your lesson, just to state the obvious? What did you learn?
well, I learned that Shannon's business is Shannon's business. And, you know, it's just as much as I thought I was helping her by saying that, because I thought they were still gonna offer the position whether she was in the school or not, it was really, you know, and she kinda got me, because she was talking about me and my best friends, and I just happened to mention it. So it was like, yeah, oversharing definitely.
And so maybe like if it had been a person who's in the smaller circle of friends up here,
Right.
something like that might be okay. But out here at the, you know, at the professional level, it's very different.
Yeah, it's a good 15-year-old lesson to learn.
And so it's really, really important for you guys to be successful as you move forward in life, as you move ahead, because you know what? As long as we're alive, we ought to be growing. If you're not growing, you're dying. And with God's love in our lives, He's making us ever more alive. When Jesus talks about giving us eternal life, it's not just some spiritual abstraction. It means that God's in you and He's leading you up. So a part about growing is learning to have the maturity to make distinctions and to filter your conversations, and not to buy the lie that says, well, I'm just going to be me and talk to anybody any way I want to. Okay, you can, but again, that's kind of what a child says. I'm going to do what I want to do. Yeah, really, unemployed, you know. You have to read situations. We read words on a page, right? And words on a page tell you what? They're just letters. But they can tell you anything, right? Just by how they're, and your environment does the same thing. I want to introduce a concept we're going to come back to a lot again. It's called emotional intelligence. Have you ever heard of IQ? What's IQ?
Your IQ level, right?
Yeah, but what is that? What is IQ level about? What are they talking about?
I guess your intelligence.
Okay, and that means,
Your
I'm
level?
pushing you a little bit, what is intelligence?
That means you're smart.
Okay, and if you're smart, you can what? Think?
Yeah, common sense.
Figure stuff out?
Yeah, common sense,
Well,
like
book
Stacy said.
smarts, like your
Okay.
IQ as in how much stuff you know about math, reading, and
Okay, all right. So usually we think that the most successful people are the smartest people, and that simply is not true. The most successful people are not the people who have a high IQ, it's the people who have a high EQ, emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence is about being able to read a situation. We're not talking about you being a chameleon. We're not talking about you being a people pleaser. When you're although that's a part of what we all do, we all, as people pleasers, we read something and then sometimes we project back what we think people, you know, want. But we're talking about reading an environment and understanding that this is a professional environment. I need to be professional here, even if other people aren't being professional. My daughter works at Kohl's, and she had a lady in her face the other day calling her all kinds of names that rhymes with witch, and and just the lady was just out of control. Who knows what kind of day she was having? Who knows what's going on at home? She may have been beat at home. You know what I'm saying? You just never know with people. It doesn't justify anything. But even in that environment where somebody's in your face yelling and screaming at you for no reason, you have to read the bigger environment. And you have to recognize, okay, I'm at work. Secondly, this isn't personal, right? I don't know this person. This person isn't right up here. Where are they? What circle are they in? They're out here. What part do they play in my life?
We gotta deal with that at Subway a lot.
Do you? How do you deal with people in a professional manner when they're not kind or professional to you at all?
You just kind of ignore it and you just make their stuff however they want it. And if they say it's made the wrong way because you put the pickles on top of the lettuce or some spill, you just gotta fix it and just kind of suck it up.
Right. And be the bigger person, right?
Yeah.
I mean, really, that's another part of what being professional and mature is,
And not roll your eyes.
Right.
the nonverbal communication,
But if it
right?
gets out of hand, then that's when you say, excuse me a second, and then you go get the manager.
Right, if
You
things,
know?
and also learning to read yourself when you're about to get out of hand. There are times when you just need to take a deep breath and seriously to stop with somebody, take a deep breath. And there are even times to where you might need to walk away. Those should be few, right? Because again, you're the bigger person, you're a professional. Why give somebody power over your life who doesn't deserve power over your life, right? I'm not saying they're nobody because God loves them, but what I'm saying is they don't have power. So being a professional person means you read situations, you recognize what circle you're operating in, and you respond appropriately to people. And you keep things, in one sense, at a little bit of a professional distance, because it's not in a personal space. And I just want to tell you guys, a lot of people have trouble with this. A lot of people can't figure this out. It's not the smartest people with the highest IQs who are most successful. It's the people with the highest EQ. And it's learning how to read people and situations and then responding appropriately. So, bottom line is, in formal communication, you need to first of all recognize when it needs to be formal. And then when it needs to be formal, keep it formal. And you know, it's interesting, Stacy's saying, like in a job interview, sometimes, you know, people will test you. And it's not about, again, being distrustful or anything else. It's just about recognizing that there are certain situations to where I can love you, but we're not friends, right? If I'm, you know, in Congress and I'm talking to a senator, you know, I don't say, hey, Steve, you know, I don't know you. And out of simple respect, Senator so-and-so. To call people sir and ma'am. I got to be honest with you. So I grew up in an alcoholic family, and my dad was a binge alcoholic, and he was in the military. But you know, nowadays in the military, I think he wouldn't have been able to stay. I don't think they put up with kind of his sort of crazy. But one of the things that he always taught us was always to say yes sir, and no sir, yes ma'am, and no ma'am. And I can't tell you how far that went in life. It's such a basic thing, right? But it shows respect. And so recognizing your environment and then choosing to live in that environment. I'm in a professional environment, I'm going to be a professional, right? Because I've read the situation, this is a professional environment. It's not a personal situation, it's a professional one. I'm going to be professional. And no matter what other people do, and I'm not saying that you don't develop friendships, I'm not saying that on break you don't talk to people. What I'm saying is that no matter how unprofessional other people are, you know where you are, and you don't change that space. This is a professional space, therefore I'm gonna be professional, and I'm gonna give a courtesy even when I'm not giving courtesy. Sometimes people say, well, they diss me. Okay, how much power do you want to hand over to people? There was a guy in DC, this is a number of years ago, although it happens all the time. Two cars pull up to a stoplight. The guy on the left looks over at him and then looks back. The guy on the right pulls out a gun and shoots him in the head and kills him. He was caught, it was on camera. Why did you do that? He rolled his eyes at me, he dissed me. Seriously, you're that small and weak of a person.
You spend the rest of your life in jail.
Yeah, that was,
Guess somebody looked at you.
yeah, how'd that work out for you, you know? But do you see what a small person that is? How insecure and weak? That a look is gonna, ooh, rattle my world, and I'm, you know, oh my gosh, that's pretty sick. Yes, ma'am, Lena.
I guess you could think to yourself, is what this person is saying or doing gonna matter in 5 minutes? Like we're not doing, or matter in an hour or a day? I mean, if you
That's a
reason
great
it to yourself.
perspective. And even, Lena, I used to have a football coach who said, it ain't gonna matter in 100 years, boys. You know, we'd be out there dying and hurting, and he'd say, it's not gonna matter in 100 years, and I'd be going, no, it really won't. But that's called perspective. So what are some ways that you guys have lost perspective or have chosen to gain perspective, retain perspective when you're in a situation where it's easy to go unprofessional? You know what I'm asking? Does that make sense?
You gotta remind yourself where you're at.
Right.
Sometimes, especially if people talk to you some kind of way and you're having a bad day yourself, just because they call you so many names and they have a bad life or a bad day, doesn't mean they need to get on you. That's not right. But that doesn't mean you gotta be as bad as that person and try to be on their level.
It comes with training.
Okay, explain.
Discipline.
That's a good word too.
You know, when I'm 40, but and I just started learning this within the last 10 years. Prior to that, my attitude when it came to work was, oh, you're not gonna talk to me that way. And I had no problem telling anybody where to get off at. And that's probably why I've had so many jobs, okay? But as I got older, it took a lot for me to train myself and start recognizing a difference between a job and a profession.
That's unpack that for us.
You know, I had to start looking at things like, okay, yeah, this is a job. Yeah, I'm just gonna go to work whether I like it or not because it's paying my bills. Whereas I've had good professions and I still carried on that same mentality, which made me lose those professions.
That's a brilliant insight.
So, as I got older, I had to train myself and say, Candy, if somebody disrespects you, you gotta kinda just look at it like, this is a profession. Whether it's a job, it's still a profession. And I had to learn this within the last 10 years.
Good for you.
But it's funny when I hear somebody else my age on the street and we're talking about work and jobs, and number one, they don't have a job. But then they're like, oh, I know me, I'm not gonna work so-and-so because if so-and-so say something to me, da-da-da-da. And I'm looking at them like, dude, man, you're like my age. When are you gonna really recognize, like, you can't have that mentality? At some point, that mentality you have, but it's a learned mentality.
It is.
It ain't
is.
something that just you wake up overnight and be like, you know what I mean? And yeah, and I'm still learning. Like, there's times where I want to just take some lettuce and tomatoes and throw it at people. But
You're still learning.
I have to bite my lip. And the sad thing about it is, when I get to that point when something like that's happening, it shows. it shows on my face as much as I try not to like verbally,
Right.
but it shows. And see,
So the person you're talking to on the street who's talking like that, where would you put them on the maturity scale?
I'll put them at the bottom.
Okay. All right.
I mean, I can see if you were like fresh out of high school or like in your early 20s, okay, I can see, because I was there. You know, but you're my age, you know what I mean? At some point, you gotta have that mentality. But I, per se, don't like when I'm in the process of learning how to like just not say nothing, but it shows on my face. And see, when it starts showing on my face, that's when like the inside of my body just starts jumping around, and it's like, okay, you keep running your mouth. I'm gonna take this tomato right here, and I'm gonna slap you across your face. But then I won't say nothing. I'll just sit there and I will look at you, and I'll bite my lip,
So, but
then I'm like-
huge. Let's put that right.
and I try not to
here.
roll the eyes, Stacy. I try not to roll the eyes, but see if they, and I try to tune them out, but when they still keep talking, especially when it comes to telling me how to do my job. You know, like, yeah, it's easy how to make a sandwich, okay, don't get me wrong. But there's really a lot of technicality on how to make the right kind of sandwich. Because I like to eat, so if you don't make it the right way I like it, I'm gonna be mad. So yeah, but
So Kenny, so you've gone from here, you know, up to here, and we talked about the nonverbals, you know, the eye
The
rolling and
rolling
the
of the
expression
eyes.
on your face.
Body
We talked about
language.
80% of communication is visual. You know, it's what people see when they look at you. So
But you've already come so far, I mean, it's
Yeah.
not, you're
yeah,
doing
but
it.
it just, you know, when I get to that point, when I start just sitting there and just tilting my head looking at you, I know like there's a part of me inside that's ready to just jump out and just choke your neck.
But you haven't, so you've already grown so much.
Well, I've only been working at Subway for a couple days, but my last job it happened, you know, over some lottery tickets. And I sat there and so the lady kept running her mouth and I'm looking at her. Then she starts calling me and then I'm looking at her and at this point my head gets, and then I start doing all of this and my eyes popping out my
Before
head.
you go to work, pray.
And
Before you
it just,
go on your job.
it happened, you know, and I'm like, and I felt bad after the fact, you know, like, oh, you came out, that person brought you out of character. And I don't like to be brought out of my character.
brought you out of character, and
Okay.
and
That took you to the top.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't, you know, when you start seeing me take my hair out, then, you know, it's a problem. It's a really, so when I
That's
start
right.
doing that, I have to be like,
That's fun, right?
I
Yeah.
saw that face, and I know what you mean.
and
When I was prepping, and she's like getting frustrated, she hears Cheryl talking, and I see it in her face, and she
Anybody's
wants
worth
to
the
do
joy,
something,
man.
and I'm like, is that her angry face?
you know, this guy came, okay, so this lady that we work with, I work with mostly at night. She's an older woman, okay,
employee or customer?
she's an employee, but I guess she's a manager or whatever, okay, cool. But she has a way of talking, okay? And she tries to get out the gate with me a couple times, but see, I'm just like, the other night I was gonna say something to her and I says, oh, Candy, you know, when you just start this job, just leave it alone, okay? But this guy comes in, okay, he wanted Italian herbs and cheese bread. We didn't have any, we were busy. But she took some out the oven, she sat it on the rack, and it takes about a good half hour for it to cool off. So he goes, I said, sir, we don't have any. I says, would you like something else? Well, isn't that bread right there? And I says, yes, sir. She goes, so she jumps into the conversation. She says, you can't have it. And he goes, what do you mean? She goes, you can't have it. It just came out the oven and it's hot. He goes, but what if I want it? She goes, but you still can't have it. So I'm standing there,
Let's back that conversation up for just a second, Candy. So she's jumping in.
my
What
conversation.
would another way to say you can't have it? Because that's like,
But that's, right, but
how,
that's,
what would the ideal way to communicate in a professional manner with that, when customers, right, they've seen, there's Italian herbs, it's right there.
right.
What would a brilliant professional, emotionally intelligent response for a manager to have been that would have helped you?
Okay, so
What
her
could she
being the
have said?
manager, first of all, she shouldn't have jumped in my conversation.
Right.
She should have let me take care of it, okay? But her being the manager, she should have said, well, sir, yes, that is the Italian herbs and cheese. She says, we just took it out the oven. Now, if you would like to wait a few minutes while it cools off, I have no
Do you
problem,
see how completely different that is though?
but
What
this,
what does that communicate to the person?
well, it made the man mad, and I'm sitting there and I'm laughing, because I'm just waiting for this man to jump on her. And I'm laughing, because I'm like, that was ignorant. So the guy said, well, what do you mean I can't have it? She goes, you can't have it. He goes,
Okay,
well,
no, what's this
See,
class
I
on? We're
wouldn't
talking
have left
about,
there without getting that bread. I would have had that bread. Just
Well, he's-
because
well,
now
that-
you've made it a win-lose,
Right.
and now nobody's communicating.
but what he said to her was, he says, I'm a customer. And he says, you cannot tell me what I can and can't have. He says, if I want that bread, I will get that bread. She turns around, she still says, oh, no, you won't.
See, now it's a
And I'm like,
win-lose.
but I'm sitting there with a knife in my hand, and I'm saying to